I think theology's for the clergy. I just believe in Jesus.
Certain hermeneutics of eschatology demand an exegetical approach.
I think you shouldn't question what you were taught in church. Isn't that blasphemy or something?
Theology Unplugged.
Hey guys, thanks for joining me. This is a special Theology Unplugged. And as a lot of you all know, the situation that me and my family have been going through for the last, I don't know how long it's been, since 2004, I guess it started with the death of my sister when she committed suicide. And then shortly after, the reason why I had to move to Oklahoma and start the Credo House from Stonebriar, a place I loved so much. I mean, just love Stonebriar, miss you all so much all the time. But I felt like I needed to come home and take care of my family. I mean, now that it's 20 years later, I look back on it and I think I was probably trying to do more than I should, and maybe I should tell people out there, don't try to do more than you should. But I know you're not going to listen to me because you can't help it. You feel responsible, and you take on burdens probably that you couldn't take on. I certainly couldn't take it on. It was too much for me. I moved back. My father was here, and my two sisters were here, along with my mother, and my mother had an aneurysm. That's why I moved back. She had high blood pressure, and after she lost her daughter, it affected her so greatly, of course. I mean, you can only imagine. And she didn't do well after that. And a year and a half later, she had an aneurysm, and they had to remove a large part of her brain. And I came home to help with my family while she got better, in hopes that she would get better, in hopes that she would return to herself and be able to restore at least most of her cognition and most of her moving ability, that kind of stuff. I mean, we all had high hopes at that time. She couldn't talk. She couldn't walk. She could say a few things. She communicated through a few words. One of those was woo woo, and she could say woo woo, and you could translate her through woo woos, and so woo woo became just about every word in the English language, and you would just interpret her, and you would actually kind of learn how to do it. She was different, very different. She was a different mom. It's hard to explain. Maybe what I said at the funeral will help, but I wanted to give you a little bit of a background before I tell you. And this brings a lot of closing to things, and I do this for all of you all because you have been so good to me and so understanding for so long. I can't count the number of people who have reached out to me over the years, and how meaningful it is, how meaningful that the church is that came around me and still comes around me, and I still feel your care, your current concern, and your prayers. And I think you being a part of it probably ought to hear about this and hear about my mother's death. We didn't expect her to die. I took care of her at her home for a little while. My dad died just a few years later of pneumonia very suddenly at age 65, I think, 66. But he was, 2013 he died. I came back in 2007, and then I moved in with my father, me and my family, to take care of my mother in 2010, 2011. And I didn't do well. I that's whenever I had the Credo House, and emotionally I fell apart. I broke in so many ways from the start to finish, and I have not healed from all of those things in many ways, and I'll never heal from all of these things in many ways. I feel like I'm starting to recover a lot more than I ever have, but I don't know. Do you ever recover from things like this? It's just the way you are now. But some of the things that were very destructive in my life that I was sinking into, like the pain pill addiction I got into while I was taking care of my mother. I had a very bad back, and whenever I was living with her after my father died, I decided to take care of her myself, and I had to, you had to deadlift her to change her. You had to carry her different places, and I thought I'd try to give her a better life, moving, at least getting up and getting around, and so I'd take her places all the time, and it just got too hard. And then once I got on pain pills and I couldn't get off, just spiraled downhill. Some of you guys know the story from there, but thankfully I was able to get off in 2017, so it's been a little while. 7 years since that problem, whenever I stopped those pain pills. But I wanted to read to you the funeral message that I read. I did do the message. I wasn't going to do it. Whenever I heard she had died, it was a surprise. She wasn't, it's not like she was healthy, but she wasn't unhealthy. And her mother had lived till she was 96, and so we didn't expect this. So it was quite a surprise. She died in her sleep, or I don't know, she died by herself at her nursing home. But she just all day long watched TV. That's all she wanted to do, and she was happy. She was at least happy. She was very different. She didn't understand her situation, and so she was happy. I want you to know that. And she probably had an aneurysm, another one. She probably had a stroke, another one. She may have had a heart attack. We just don't know. We didn't have an autopsy done or anything like that because we just know God took her, and in many ways we were grateful. But anyway, all of that to say this is the funeral, and I'm going to put some pictures up while I read this of my mother so that you can see her. Some of you, maybe you've never seen her before and you don't have a picture of her in your mind. I want you to be able to see her. You'll actually be able to see my whole family throughout the years, including my sister Angie. She's the one who has the dark hair. She looks like my mother a lot. But please let me, if I can, do this for you and read through what I read at the funeral. It's not that long. I'm going to try to get through it. At the funeral, I didn't. I broke apart the first sentence. I might do it again now. I don't know. Probably will. I feel like I am already. Okay. This is the last time I'm going to do this. I can't do it anymore. Trying to get the picture deal back so that you can see it. Okay. I do feel responsible for performing my mother's funeral. I did it for my sister and for my dad. At some point, my sisters and I became a bit jaded. It's hard for us to even understand. Maybe it's from all the unnecessary death in our family. Maybe it's because we really don't know when my mother died, either in our hearts or in our minds. Maybe it was 2006. Certainly, we have not seen that mom since that day. And the way that mom went down, so different, already jaded from losing her daughter, the way that she did. She was already so different and so hurt and so confused. Maybe it was a few days ago, I don't even remember what day, when that mom went to join the Lord with the other version of my mom. And the two became whole again. But here's the deal. Which one do I speak about? Which emotions do I use? The ones now? The jaded ones? Or the ones then? No one remembers this new mom we received, as they never had a chance to. She was simple, childlike, and funny. However, in many ways, however, the many who would come to the funeral would probably expect me to talk about the one they knew. The one we, with scruples, began mourning a long time ago. We never got to finish mourning her as we didn't know how, There weren't any patterns for us to follow. We never had that mom's funeral, either in our hearts or in public. Those who knew our old mom would expect us to talk about and mourn the old one, and perhaps we should. We don't know. But the mourning delayed turned into mourning denied, and we're confused to realize this. So how do I talk about her? For the sake of those who come to honor her, that is probably the right thing to do. But then there's this new mom. The truth be told, we would all rather not have to do this at all. We didn't want to. It's confusing. The guilt that confusion brings to mind is not unlike the guilt we have all experienced the last 20 years. Sorry. Well, I suppose it was that hope turned into guilt, as at first we had hopes that my first mom would eventually come back to us as her past self. When she didn't, and this new mom became a new member of the family, the guilt denied turned into guilt for not knowing what to do with this new mom. We loved her with all our heart, all the heart that the old one taught us to use. But as I realized I was not our family superhero, and I didn't have the power to fix things like I thought, I coped in ways that continue to break the small bits of emotional constitution our family had left. After my sojourn in the land of escape, my two sisters and I have dealt with things the only way we know how. Well, better than it is. We don't deal with things well. But we are thankful to have each other. Then comes this very surprising news that my mother has suddenly passed away at 74. A few days earlier, we had been discussing in a series of text messages about how our mother would probably outlive us all. After all, her mom lived into her late 90s. God obviously had a reason for her in our lives these last 20 years, but we don't know what it was. I'm sure it's something working behind the scenes, as God always does. He's under no obligation to tell us anything. But this news came as a shock to us all. In confusion, we have scrambled to find our emotions. We have stepped back and assessed them and tried to understand where they're at. We haven't really known. Are we sad? Are we happy? Which mom did we lose? We don't know, and hence, we don't know how to mourn. We think maybe we already have. Then comes the big funeral where all those who knew her, the 2006 mother, would attend. Now what do we do? I'm sure my mother would want me to do her funeral. I'm sure that both the old mother and the new mother would want me to. But what I'm not sure about is what either one of them would have wanted a funeral. I have no big message to give. When Angie died, there was no kryptonite in my blood. I saw God's plan. I knew in this life, and I saw God's plan, and I knew in this life we were destined for pain to a large degree, and I was ready to tell everybody the gospel that my mother had taught me so faithfully. When my father died, I was feeling the effects, but still knew what my part was. At my dad's funeral, I was only mourning one person. Now, my sisters and I come together, and we are confused and jaded. We love both mothers. We have mourned for many years, and it transitioned into mourning another for many years. I don't want anybody to see any of my words as saying our faith in Christ without seeing our faith in Christ within and under and around everything I say. We have never ceased to trust God. We've been angry, confused, and more than anything else, spiritually exhausted. We all limp into this funeral with wounds open and our hearts broken, but mostly a confused minds. In some ways, it's as if for the first time in the last 20 years, we're asking what just happened. The acute discovery of divine meaning escaped us some time back. We are just realizing this. I guess we quit looking for it a long time ago. The daily prayers we had for our old mom to come back turned into weekly prayers. Then they turned into prayers, monthly prayers. Then they turned into yearly prayers. And I have to admit, I haven't known, it's been much more than a year since I prayed for the healing of Grandma. That's what we called our new mom. There was a mother, and then there was Grandma. And that's who we're having a funeral for this day. They both loved the Lord, and they both loved us, and we loved them both. There's so much of the gospel of Christ that they would want us to share. It's all my first mom cared about. She wanted to tell everybody she met about Christ. The last thing I remember my first mom saying to me, truly, and this is the last thing, the very last thing I remember. It was in her pain about my sister. It was in relation to her and God, the God she taught us so much about. She said, "Michael, I don't like him, but I'm still going to follow him because it's right." That was so typically her. She was authentic as they come. She taught us how to be authentic. There was not a vestige of veneer Christianity in her. She lived out her faith and her emotions. She knew whom she believed in. And as my sisters and I are here today, mangled and confused, not really knowing what we're doing in this situation, we don't want you to think our pain and our current disorientation is coming from those with their fist in the air at God saying why, but rather from those who have gone through a process, just like my mom, saying sometimes we don't like him, but we still love him and we're going to follow him. In many ways, as we look at each other, we see how different we have become. In some ways, just as different. As my mom, my first mom to my second mom, God transformed us into new people, I guess. We believe in him more deeply than we did then. That's what my mom would want me to say to you. You may not like him all the time, and you may rarely understand him, but he's worth all the pain and the brokenness. None of this is without purpose and without redemption. The brokenness of Christ becomes our brokenness. And one day we will be resurrected with him. She would plead with everybody not to get the wrong idea. It is through many trials and tribulations that we come into the kingdom of heaven. But it is only through our trust in Christ, trust that says with him, stays with him, and says we will follow you no matter what life throws at us. He hasn't guaranteed us anything. In fact, you might say he has guaranteed us pain, but it's not worthless pain. It is not hopeless pain. It's not pain where you don't have a sovereign God of the universe failing to call you the apple of his eye. The strength that she had to say that day, I don't like him, but I'm going to follow him, is the strength that I want with me and my sisters. He is a dangerous God, but he is good. And we stand before him in fear, yet at the same time we stand before him more comfortably than we ever could be. He is our refuge, and he is our fortress, and come what may, we will trust in him. That is what she taught us to do. That is what she did, both the first and the second mom. We love you both, and we're so glad you're back together. Okay, well, that's the story. It's kind of the conclusion to so much. And I know you would want to hear about this. And I know some of you who were her students and you listen to this, many of you friends, the guilt that you guys had. I know you had, there's so many of you that had the same guilt because you didn't do more. You weren't there more. You weren't around her more. We all feel that. But I wanted to bring you in on kind of, I'm not saying it's closure at all. It's just, here we are, here's the situation. You've been involved from the very beginning, and I wanted to keep you involved now. So thank you for listening to this. I'll see you next time. This is Michael Patton, Theology Unplugged.
Theology